Sri Ramakrishna was grateful to the Divine Mother for sending him one who doubted his own realizations. Often he asked Narendra to test him as the money changers test their coins. He laughed at Narendra's biting criticism of his spiritual experiences and samadhi. When at times Narendra's sharp words distressed him, the Divine Mother herself would console him, saying, "Why do you listen to him? In a few days he will believe every word you say." He could hardly bear Narendra's absences. Often he would weep bitterly for the sight of him. Sometimes Narendra would find the Master's love embarrassing, and one day he sharply scolded him, warning him that such infatuation would soon draw him down to the level of its object. The Master was distressed and prayed to the Divine Mother. Then he said to Narendra, "You rogue, I won't listen to you any more. Mother says that I love you because I see God in you. And the day I no longer see God in you, I shall not be able to bear even the sight of you." The Master wanted to train Narendra in the teachings of the non-dualistic Vedanta philosophy. But Narendra, because of his Brahmo upbringing, considered it wholly blasphemous to look on man as one with his Creator. One day, at the temple garden, he laughingly said to a friend, "How silly! This jug is God, this cup is God, whatever we see is God. And we too are God. Nothing could be more absurd." Sri Ramakrishna came out of his room and gently touched him. Spellbound, he immediately perceived that everything in the world was indeed God. A new universe opened around him. Returning home in a dazed state, he found there too that the food, the plate, the eater himself, the people around him were all God. When he walked in the street, he saw that the cabs, the horses, the streams of people, the buildings were all Brahman. He could hardly go about his day's business. His parents became anxious about him and thought him ill. And when the intensity of the experience abated a little, he saw the world as a dream. Walking in a public square, he would strike his head against the iron railings to know whether they were real. It took him a number of days to recover his normal self. He had a foretaste of the great experiences yet to come and realized that the words of the Vedanta were true. At the beginning of 1884, Narendra's father suddenly died of heart failure, leaving the family in a state of utmost poverty. There were 6 or 7 mouths to feed at home. creditors were knocking at the door. Relatives who had accepted his father's unstinted kindness now became enemies, some even bringing suit to deprive Narendra of his ancestral home. Actually starving and barefoot, Narendra searched for a job, but without success. He began to doubt whether anywhere in the world there was such a thing as unselfish sympathy. Two rich women made evil proposals to him and promised to put an end to his distress, but he refused them with contempt. Narendra began to talk of his doubt of the very existence of God. His friends thought he had become an atheist and piously circulated gossip, adducing unmentionable motives for his unbelief. His moral character was maligned. Even some of the master's disciples partly believed the gossip, and Narendra told these to their faces that only a coward believed in God through fear of suffering or hell. But he was distressed to think that Sri Ramakrishna too might believe these false reports. His pride revolted. He said to himself, "What does it matter if a man's good name rests on such slender foundations? I don't care." But later on, he was amazed to learn that the master had never lost faith in him. To a disciple who complained about Narendra's degradation, Sri Ramakrishna replied, "Hush, you fool! The mother has told me. It can never be so. I won't look at you if you speak that way again." The moment came when Narendra's distress reached its climax. He had gone the whole day without food. As he was returning home in the evening, he could hardly lift his tired limbs. He sat down in front of a house in sheer exhaustion, too weak even to think. His mind began to wander. Suddenly, a divine power lifted the veil over his soul. He found the solution of the problem of the coexistence of divine justice and misery, the presence of suffering in the creation of a blissful providence. He felt bodily refreshed. His soul was bathed in peace, and he slept serenely. Narendra now realized that he had a spiritual mission to fulfill. He resolved to renounce the world, as his grandfather had renounced it, and he came to Sri Ramakrishna for his blessing. But even before he had opened his mouth, the master knew what was in his mind and wept bitterly at the thought of separation. "I know you cannot lead a worldly life," he said. "But for my sake, live in the world as long as I live? One day, soon after, Narendra requested Sri Ramakrishna to pray to the Divine Mother to remove his poverty. Sri Ramakrishna bade him pray to her himself, for she would certainly listen to his prayer. Narendra entered the shrine of Kali. As he stood before the image of the Mother, he beheld her as a living goddess, ready to give wisdom and liberation. Unable to ask her for petty worldly things, he prayed only for knowledge and renunciation, love and liberation. The Master rebuked him for his failure to ask the Divine Mother to remove his poverty, and sent him back to the temple. But Narendra, standing in her presence, again forgot the purpose of his coming. Thrice he went to the temple at the bidding of the Master, and thrice he returned, having forgotten in her presence why he had come. He was wondering about it when it suddenly flashed in his mind that this was all the work of Sri Ramakrishna. So now he asked the Master himself to remove his poverty, and was assured that his family would not lack simple food and clothing. This was a very rich and significant experience for Narendra. It taught him that Shakti, the divine power, cannot be ignored in the world, and that in the relative plane, the need for worshipping a personal God is imperative. Sri Ramakrishna was overjoyed with the conversion. The next day, sitting almost on Narendra's lap, he said to a devotee, pointing first to himself, then to Narendra, I see I am this, and again that. Really, I feel no difference. A stick floating in the Ganges seems to divide the water, but in reality the water is one. Do you see my point? Well, whatever is the Mother. Isn't that so? In later years, Narendra would say, Sri Ramakrishna was the only person who, from the time he met me, believed in me uniformly throughout. Even my mother and brothers did not. It was his unwavering trust and love for me that bound me to him forever. He alone knew how to love. Worldly people only make a show of love for selfish ends.